Before moving on to the classical world, I want to briefly mention the prehistory to 500 BCE. So, over millions of years, humans evolved from a species that was largely at the mercy of nature to one that managed its environment and shaped its destiny. People first learned to use tools, weapons, and fire to enhance their skills as hunters and gatherers and expand into new habitats. About 10,000 years ago, they began to domesticate wild plants and animals and settle in villages. The earliest civilizations emerged around 5,000 years ago, about 3000 BCE, in Mesopotamia and the Nile River Valley, when villagers using irrigation techniques to increase the yields of those fertile floodplains coalesced into complex societies. The development of writing was one of the hallmark of civilization, along with the emergence of cities and the rise of powerful city-states, kingdoms, and empires. By 4,000 years ago, 2000 BCE, civilizations had flowered in other fertile places around the world, including the Indus River Valley in present-day Pakistan and the Yellow River Valley in China. In the Mediterranean region, meanwhile, complex societies arose that grew great primarily through trade and colonization. Some 3,000 years ago, about 1200 BCE, civilization was finally emerging in the Americas in the form of monumental ceremonial centers, where rulers functioning as high priests or godlike figures commanded the labor and devotion of their followers. Indeed, many of the world's first civilizations were ruled by kings who claimed kinship with the gods. In comparison, we have the classical world from 550 BCE to around 80 or CE 700. The first civilizations were like single bright lights, widely scattered, the beams of their progress barely reaching one another. Between 1000 and 500 BCE, as these societies grew larger, they began to link up and exchange ideas. The world grew more sophisticated and entered what historians call the Classical Age, approximately 500 BCE to CE 500. A number of civilizations, particularly those of Greece, Rome, Persia, China, and India, began to spread across great areas of land, incorporating other peoples into their cultures and reaching a high degree of internal organization, scientific invention, and artistic achievement. Most raised powerful armies to extend their territories and fight off threats from nomadic invaders. Many engaged in long-distance trade, most notably over the thousands of miles of Silk Road between East and West. Great thinkers emerged in several places: Confucius in China, the Buddha in India, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and others in Greece. Despite their different cultures, the great classical societies faced many of the same problems. Vast empires often require vast bureaucracies and forced labor to maintain them. Powerful emperors had powerful enemies, and internal strife was common. In the end, many of the world's classical civilizations in the Axial Age weakened and fell to outside invaders, but their influence never died. It is felt to this day in almost every culture in the world. Now, we will go to Persia, 550 BCE to CE 651. Persia's beginnings can be traced to around 1000 BCE, when a number of nomadic peoples, including the Persians and the Medes, drifted into today's Iran and from Central Asia. Both enjoyed organizational success until the Persians overcame and absorbed the Medes around 550 BCE. Leading the Persians at that time was a keen military strategist known as Cyrus the Great, a member of the Achaemenid family that would go on to control the throne for several hundred years. According to the Greek writer Xenophon, Cyrus was a judicious leader of men, strict, fair, and ambitious. Between 558 and 529 BCE, he seized control of what is now Iran, Lydia, and Babylonia, stretching his empire from Egypt to India. After Cyrus died in 529 BCE, the sprawling empire gained some cohesion under Darius I, under another Achaemenid, who united the many conquered cities and tribal groups into a single Persian nation during his reign from 522 to 486 BCE. He adopted a unified coinage, thereby simplifying the widespread economy, and added Egypt and northwestern India to the empire, which now covered almost 2 million square miles. Imperial Persia's 20 provinces were ruled by satraps, or governors. To help their vast control of their territory, the Achaemenid rulers built the 1,600-mile royal road from the Aegean coast of western Anatolia to what is now western Iran, as well as numerous secondary roads. Royalty kept its eyes on far-flung provinces through inspectors, state spies who reported on activities that might lead to revolt. Word traveled quickly thanks to a courier system of hard-riding messengers who would change to rested horses at stations spaced out along the graded roads. The roads also helped to speed the military to trouble spots and aid the travels of merchants. Cyrus and Darius ruled over a wide area so successfully partly because they were tolerant of local ways and of other religions. The two rulers attempted to retain local legal systems, customs, and religions so long as they did not threaten the regime. Zoroastrianism, the Persian religion, sought no converts. After Babylon was annexed, for example, the Jews who had been exiled there were allowed to return to Jerusalem. Based on the teachings of the prophet Zoroaster, about whom little is known, the religion teaches obedience to one virtuous deity who is in conflict with another power that represents evil. It is still the religion of the Parsis, a people descended from the Persian refugees who sought freedom from Muslim persecution in the 8th and 10th centuries CE. The Persian realm prospered for more than 2 centuries with no fewer than 4 capitals. Excavations at one of them, Persepolis, reveal evidence of great wealth, grand architecture, and extravagant works of silver and gold. Additions to Persia's vast holdings came to a halt when Darius's attempts to invade Europe only partially succeeded. All of the Persians once destroyed Athens, they were never able to conquer Greece. After struggling with the Greek city-states, the Achaemenid dynasty fell to Alexander the Great of Macedon in 330 BCE. After his death, the generals divided the realm into 3 portions, which became the Seleucid, Parthian, and Sassanid empires. Conflicts with Rome eventually brought down the Seleucids and Parthians, but the Sassanids held on to their land between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf until finally overcome by Islam in CE 651. North American cultures, 500 BCE, CE 400. North America in 500 BCE was home to a variety of tribal cultures. On the plains, nomadic hunting bands pursued buffalo, using dogs to help haul their belongings from place to place. In the southwest, people were settling in villages thanks to the introduction of corn from Mesoamerica around 1000 BCE. The first corn cultivated in the southwest had small cobs and merely supplemented what people in the area obtained through hunting and gathering. Over time, the inhabitants came up with hardier and more nutritious varieties. Corn became their mainstay, and they built settlements near their fields where they lived in pit houses and crafted clay pots to preserve their food. Not until after CE 500 did tribes in the southwest begin to practice irrigation on a large scale and build large communal dwellings such as cliff houses and pueblos. The first complex cultures in North America emerged in the eastern woodlands along the Ohio River and its tributaries. The soil there was fertile, and villagers began cultivating squash and gourds long before corn was introduced to the region around CE 200. Fish and game abounded, and the waterways facilitated trade. In this generous environment, people known as mound builders developed. One group, the Adena, lived in circular lodges covered with bark or woven mats laid over a framework of posts. The hunting of deer and other game provided the Adena with food, clothing, and other necessities. The great burial mounds of the Adena were raised up over several generations and included the remains of common peoples as well as their leaders. One Adena burial, the Grave Creek Mound in West Virginia, was some 300 feet wide and 70 feet high and contained several layers of bodies interred there over a century beginning around 250 BCE. More than 60,000 tons of earth went into building the monument, which was surrounded by a moat. Around 100 BCE, the Adena gave way to the Hopewell, whose culture was similar but more elaborate. The Hopewell, like the Adena, performed rituals designed to appease the spirits of the animals they pursued and seek their cooperation. Shamans or priests wore antler headdresses to signal that they were in touch with those spirits. The Hopewell were successful enough at hunting, fishing, and farming to devote considerable energy to other activities. Weavers and potters crafted articles that were both useful and decorative, and traders followed well-marked trails or traversing rivers and dug-out canoes, sought items from distant tribes, acquiring shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes area, and mica from the Carolinas. Gifted artisans crafted those materials into beads, necklaces, bracelets, and pendants representing human and animal figures. The bodies of the Hopewell ruling elite were laid in log caskets, painted with ochre or graphite, and decked out with treasuries, including masks inlaid with animal teeth. Hopewell chiefs accumulated greater wealth than their Adena counterparts and took much of that wealth with them to the grave. At one Hopewell mound in Ohio, members of a ruling family were literally buried in pearls by the tens of thousands. Women and children were sometimes placed alongside chiefs in mortuary houses that were then burned and covered with earth. The women and children were probably family members who perished at the same time as the chief in an epidemic or died earlier and were reunited with him after his death. Treasures buried with Hopewell leaders reflected great artistic skill and specialization. The fact that so much handiwork was entombed with the elite rather than handed down to descendants meant that traders and artisans were kept busy acquiring fresh materials and crafting new items. The seemingly wasteful burial practices of Hopewell leaders may actually have stimulated their economy. The Hopewell built large enclosures consisting of numerous burial mounds, surrounded by walls of earth up to 12 feet high. Some of these walled precincts may have served as ceremonial centers or as forts in times of danger. Mound builders in southern Ohio constructed an effigy shaped like a snake that extended nearly a quarter mile. Eulogy attributed to the Adena or the Hopewell, this effigy resembled the monumental line drawings of the Nazca in South America, in that it could be viewed clearly only from above. Hopewell culture declined after CE 400, perhaps because the climate turned colder, reducing harvest and increasing conflict with rival groups. Centuries later, a mighty new mound-building culture would emerge along the Mississippi River, one that would reach great heights, unimagined by the Adena and the Hopewell. We will see them later. Now, we must end this video. Thank you.